Good morning and welcome to the latest in our Stephenson Harwood webinar Super Yacht series. My name is Max Lemanski, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a partner in the Marine and International Trade Department based in London. I have a specialism, amongst other things, in super yachts, both the negotiation of the contracts, but also in the unfortunate event when there's a dispute. I should start by saying that if you're Danish, my commiserations. It was a soft penalty. I think everyone would see that. And if you're Italian, indeed, I believe that at least one of our speakers today is Italian, then we'll see you on Sunday at Wembley, although not with actual tickets because I'm not that wealthy. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about new builds and refit contracts. And the critical question of owners' security. It can be a little bit of a minefield. Everybody, of course, wants a yacht. They want it on time for the season. They want it with no glitches, and they want it on budget. But there are plenty of ways that new builds and refit projects can go wrong, and there are plenty of ways in which owners don't get their money back. To guide us through today's minefield, we have four great speakers. I'm very pleased to say that in keeping with our series to date, we also have two very experienced guest speakers. And our first guest speaker today will be Daniela, who is a new build division coordinator, who has just joined Camper & Nicholsons as a new build division coordinator. She has been working within the industry since 2006, for the most part for Perini Navi. During her time at the Italian shipyard, Daniela covered a variety of roles, each molding her perfectly for the role of new build coordinator at Camper & Nicholson's office in Geneva. I had the pleasure of talking with Daniela a few weeks ago, and I don't think there's anything on this subject she doesn't know. So I'm going to pass you over to Daniela. What we will do, if I may, is hold back questions for the end. The schedule today is we're going to have approximately 40 minutes or so for the talks, and then we'll take questions at the end, giving people the ability to leave if they want to, but of course, hopefully they might stick around for the Q&A as well. So that's our introduction. Daniela, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Max, for this nice presentation. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today, and thanks to you and to the whole Stephenson Harwood team for inviting me to join this panel. As you correctly said, after 15 years I spent working in a shipyard. Today it's the first time that I speak in my new role as a new build coordinator at Camper & Nicholsons at a public event. Just a brief introduction of the new build division. We started establishing it approximately 3 years ago with the intent of offering an even more complete service to our clients, accompanying them throughout the entire building process, going way beyond supervisory services. We do assemble a highly qualified team of industry professionals in order to transform an extremely complex process as the one of building a new super yacht is to one that the client can truly enjoy. We assist our owners in considering the new project by first of all taking some key decisions together with them. So we have to assess as a very first thing what kind of use they want to make of their yacht. Do they want to enjoy it with their family and friends? Do they want to intensively charter her? Do they want to cross the ocean, maybe stay in the Asian Pacific area rather than the Mediterranean? Do they like to explore the planet in remote, or are they fans of high speed? So first thing we need to do is to assess the main priorities in terms of performance, living spaces, and the delivery date. So to then be able, together with the owner and based on these questions, to see how to manage and complete their dream project by choosing the right kind of yacht, the right designer, and ultimately the right builder. So obviously we have two main goals, let's say, in the selection process. First one is to deliver the owners the yacht that exceeds their expectations in terms of quality and product. And the second very important point is to protect the owner's investment over long term. Obviously, this implies the need for deep knowledge of the market and the characteristics of the builders to choose the right builder. Obviously, we look at the track records we have of several shipyards, of all shipyards, in terms of delivery time, quality, litigation, if any, and obviously also their financial conditions to make sure that the build goes smoothly. Another thing, talking about protecting the investment of the owner, we obviously look at is historic value of depreciation of the vessels built by a certain shipyard. For this, we are able to use our in-house database, which has nearly 16,000 yachts and statistics that are helping us to examine and assess, as we said, depreciation, charter fees of comparable yachts, knowing at that point how the running costs can be, let's say, recovered through charter. So this for sure is a valuable tool to help decide which is the right builder. Once we have established the main parameters for the project, we introduce a designer, a naval architect, to make sure that all these needs and requirements are then, let's say, translated in a concept. We run several tender processes with designers that then meet the client in order to assess and present their concept and fine-tune it together with the client. Once the concept has been chosen, we do, let's say, same thing with a short list of shipyards to then find and figure out which is the right match and the perfect fit with the criteria of concept and building criteria, as we said before. Then, obviously, once the builder is chosen, we enter in, let's say, the pre-contractual phase when the designer and the client start fine-tuning the design together with the builder. This is quite a delicate moment because sometimes, clients and designers might get a bit taken away and giving or providing the input to the builder of their aesthetics. The builder needs to convert this in their, let's say, engineering phase and make sure that everything goes smoothly and that clear structures are being set right from the beginning to make sure there are no conflicts or issues coming up later on. Obviously, in this pre-contract phase, while assessing the technical details, we always suggest the involvement of a maritime lawyer, because in this crucial phase, one needs to define in detail all the contractual documentation to make sure that the less gray areas you have, the better, obviously, than the building process, because clearly, if you have a common ground for years of construction with detailed provisions, this is of utmost importance. Obviously, there's a long list of points one needs to pay attention to in this negotiation phase. Also, because you have to consider that usually the initial draft of the contract comes from the builder and therefore is likely to be a bit favorable of to the shipyard. So in the third slide, we can see I've listed a couple of the major the next slide, please. Thank you. Of the major, of the major points that need to be tackled when talking about the construction contract. I would start from the stage payments and the payment processes, which is the 2 slides before, please. This is obviously a very important thank you very much. A very important aspect to be agreed upon. Also because it determines the exposure of the client and the client's investment. It's therefore paramount to ensure that there's a good balance between the cash flow that is injected in the project and the construction as it progresses. Clearly, it depends a bit on the type of project you have, because there can be a lot of differences. For example, if you have a project that has already been built on spec or has started production on spec and therefore is further ahead, as opposed to a full custom prototype project that maybe together with the help of the buyer's designer still has to be engineered thoroughly before construction can begin. So obviously the buyer would start paying the shipyard before he actually has a physical value or something has already been started producing. So in this latter case, it's even more important that the owner's payment is properly secured by, for example, refund guarantees rather than in a second stage transfer of title, which are both topics I know my other panelists will then illustrate later in detail. So the definition of milestones for the payment terms is very, very important. And in my experience, I would say it's prudent to establish not only 1 milestone per payment, but at least a couple, between 2 and 4, choosing emblematic stages of production to make sure that the shipyard builds to sequence and doesn't, let's say, rush to build the milestone and builds out of sequence. So this is a very important aspect to look at. Another important topic in my opinion and in my experience are the budget allowances. This is to say the values included in the price and related to certain supplies of equipment, which most likely will then be personalized during the building process, such as, for example, the interior. There it is helpful or needed to have a value per square meter for the outfitting rather than the value of certain elements such as the marble, the wood, upholstery, etc. Same thing, for example, for the entertainment system or Navcom, because the clearer the description and the limits of the inclusions are, the less discussion you will have later when the owner then defines these points and makes his selections. So everybody is clear from the beginning what is included and what is not included. On the next slide, I bring up another major point, which I think is very important to tackle. Said that building a super yacht is a unique occasion to leave the mark for the owner. It is often the case that while progressing in production, while shaping the yacht and the project, they easily start getting new ideas, also because talking about 2-3 years sometimes of building process, it's clear that somebody might even change a bit its mind or new things come up. So when it comes to personalization, it is important also to have clear provisions for change orders. So what we always suggest and make sure to have in the construction contracts is a clear definition of the builder's operating margin, stating also the value per hour of the white collar and the blue collar works, so to then be able to clearly analyze and have an objective documentation of the change order, forcing or obliging the builder a bit to make the change order as detailed as possible. Another aspect in addition to the economic aspect of a change order that is important to look at when asking an extra is the time impact. Here we always suggest that if the builder claims to need extra time, they should demonstrate that this particular addition or modification is on the critical path of construction, meaning that it actually shifts the overall construction time. Otherwise, builders tend to take advantage or would be or could be led to take an advantage of an extra or a modification in order to recover a bit of time needed for the building process. Another important aspect obviously regards the overall survey and the rights and obligations buyer's representative has. This, of course, needs to be established in the construction contract. What our team, but in general all buyer's representatives do or should do is in-depth review of the main plans and drawings. Here it is prudent to have a list of the most important plans and drawings that are required to be formally approved by the buyer's representative. And another point that is very important to include in the construction contract is to have the builder providing the production schedule in a periodical manner, say bi-monthly, to the buyer's representative. Of course, the responsibility of the production schedule and the production sequence will always remain to the builder's account, but having to provide updated schedules on one hand helps the builder to always remain concentrated and on spot, and it also helps the buyer's representative to spot and raise any irregularities if there are in real time, discuss the issue with the shipyard and find a mutual solution to smoothly then move forward and hopefully remain in time with the production schedule. Then I would say I have another couple of points which I would obviously point out to be important for construction contracts, which are in the next slide. And they are, thank you, they are obviously the phases of acceptance and test and trials, which is where everything comes to the point of checking if the builder actually has performed as per contract. Obviously, having a professional supervision from the beginning on, this very much helps to make this phase and process as smooth as possible, because things have been avoided or issues have been avoided and corners have been smoothened during the build process. Here it is always prudent in the construction contract to neatly determine both the way of notification of tests and trials, which are the major tests and trials which may go beyond the ones that class and flag require, that the buyer's representative want to have executed and that need to be absolutely approved. And yeah, this is, I would say, a very important part of this final phase. Obviously, a thorough check of all contractual delivery documents needs to then be done in this very final instance in order to make sure that everything is also from a documentary point of view ready for then registering and operating the yacht. And then finally, when she is eventually delivered, obviously, and the owner wants to enjoy her, in new projects, it's nearly impossible to not have any technical issues. So it is very important to define already in the construction contract a clear and proper warranty procedure in order to make sure that this, let's say, unpleasant aspect of potential technical defects gets solved as quickly as possible and in the less impacting way for the owner. And from, let's say, an investment point of view, here it's always prudent, for example, to include provisions that the owner needs to pre-approve, for example, the travel expenses of technicians if technicians have to reach the yacht while she's overseas. At least you don't get automatically with an invoice everything, but you pre-approve and check that travel expenses are in the right market logic. Another thing that if one is able to negotiate it in the beginning with the shipyard would be good to include in the contract is a definition of a certain range from the builder shipyard where warranty sessions usually are to be carried out, that the cost to reach the shipyard might be covered in a certain range by the builder, since we are talking about necessary warranty works, so a default from the builder. Obviously, Camper Nicholsons is there to assist the owner even in the warranty phase through yacht management, and we take care of all the operational bureaucratical aspects. But yeah, this is basically what are my major suggestions of topics to be carefully looked at in construction contracts to make sure that the owner is as safeguarded as possible.
Thank you very much, Daniela. It sounds like, may I ask a quick question? I know I said questions at the end, but how many of these types of projects would you have going at one time? Because I'm not sure I could organize more than that.
Allora, at the moment, apart from the fact that we're about to sign 3 in these days, so if they all will be signed, we have at the moment, I think, 8 projects we're project managing. But as you know, the new build market in this first 2 quarters is extremely booming. So yeah, we would even be happy to have more. So yeah, but we are already quite well equipped, I would say.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. If anyone else has any other questions, please do send me a message. I'll be happy to run that past Daniela at the end of the next talk. So we've heard about the new build contract itself, but now we've got 2 speakers who are going to talk about the owner's security options. The first is Ezio de Maso, who is our finance specialist based in our Paris office. And if you want to do anything related to the financing of a yacht, then Ezio is your man. So Ezio, I shall pass you over, and I look forward to hearing more about the progressive transfer of title arrangements.
Well, thank you, Max, and good morning to everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today to discuss about progressive transfer of title of a yacht under construction. And so transfer of title arrangements are common features of yacht building contracts where it is possible to register the buyer's title during the construction of the yacht. And this is the case in some of the most important jurisdictions where construction takes place, such as Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany. And we will discuss today about the key points to be considered when looking at these. So as delivery on completion coupled with refund guarantees is regarded to be the default position in most commercial shipbuilding contracts. But there may be reasons to deviate from this in the context of a particular project, such as a yacht. In particular, the main reason to do so is because the cost of the refund guarantees and the cost of capital of the builder to lock in a security for the refund guarantor could be taken into account and in the price of the project and lead to a reduction of the sales price. However, if this is something that an owner is willing to consider and implement, it should be taken into account that this might be a little bit more complex than a refund guarantee structure that Emma will present and discuss later. And so there are several points to be taken into account, and we will now have a look at this. So the idea behind any transfer of title arrangement is to give to the buyer some form of security to cover mainly the insolvency of the builder. Because if it has been properly implemented, the transfer of title will protect the owner, who will be the legal and registered owner of the hull under construction, and this will be out of reach of the insolvency estate and the other shipyards creditors. However, as Daniela said, these are arrangements that usually are meaningful only if they are put in place at the point of the construction, where construction has reached a tangible stage of construction, where you can really identify parts and equipment and materials that more or less correspond to the value of the pre-delivery installments already made. But as we all know, at the very beginning of the project in particular, there are costs that are incurred by the yard and that are not reflected in a construction in a shed. Having said that, the first point to look at when considering this type of arrangements is the title clause. Often, yacht building contracts are subject to English law, and it is important that the transfer of title clause is compliant and the law applicable to the contract. But not only, because in case of builder's insolvency, we need to make sure that this clause can be enforced against the liquidator or the trustee in bankruptcy. So to say, just as an example, an Italian court-appointed liquidator. So it is important that it is checked that the clause works under local law, and that local law formalities are complied with, and that appropriate steps are taken to register the title in the register of ships under construction or its equivalent. It is in addition to title to the hull, it is important that the owner considers how if he can have title to other materials and equipment that are not materially installed on board, and that might be at in the premises of other main subcontractors. So it will need to be checked with the assistance of a local lawyer if any type of security can be put in place to secure that these parts and equipment that are usually identified by putting a mark that refers to the project number would constitute that the owner has legal title to them. It is once the owner has become the legal owner of the hull and the equipment, he will need to ensure that the insurance cover has been properly updated to take into account, to reflect that he has an interest and actually is the owner of the hull. And if possible, it is advisable to include provisions in the policy that says that insurance proceeds are paid directly to him, in particular in case of total loss. One other thing is that one thing that builders now in these days are more and more often asking buyers is to give them irrevocable powers of attorney to sell the hull in case of buyer's default, or they are even asking for a construction mortgage securing the payment of the balance of the construction price. Why it is something that it is becoming common to see, it is important that owners consider to insert language in these documents providing for these securities to be enforceable only in case of buyer's default that is uncurable and continuing. If one very important point that is to be considered in the context of progressive transfer title arrangements is if the buyer intends to obtain some form of pre-delivery financing. In most cases, pre-delivery lenders would require an assignment of refund guarantees, but this won't be possible if the transfer of title was offered as an alternative to bank guarantees. In this case, however, the buyer might offer to his bank to take a mortgage on the hull under construction, but it's not always possible or not always acceptable to the lenders to have this type of security, and this is something that should be considered since the outset of a project, because there are several factors that the bank would look at, such as the creditworthiness of the builder, the technical ability of the builder to deliver the particular project they're building, and also the context of the jurisdiction where the mortgage might need to be enforced and the rights that are given to the mortgagee. Another point that lenders would consider in the context of a pre-delivery financing involving progressive transfer of title is the fact that in addition to the assignment of the rights of the buyer under the building contract, they will want to have a kind of tripartite coordination agreement with the builder, so to ensure that in case of buyer's default, the builder would not sell the hull under construction without consulting the bank and without giving them the possibility to complete the project. All these arrangements are possible and are usually implemented, but the discussion between the parties can take time, in particular if builders are not used to this type of agreements. So it is important that owners who consider, who are willing to agree with the builder to have this type of arrangements, consider if they want to have to put in place some form of pre-delivery financing or not, and if they want to, well, if they should really discuss with their bank from the very beginning. It's nothing that can't be done, but it's just the fact that going to see a bank after a contract has been signed has proven to be in the past quite complex, because the builder has no real incentive in changing terms that have already been agreed. And so my only suggestion in this context is to think about if the agreement with the builder can work, first of all, from the buyer's point of view, but then also consider if this is something that can be acceptable by a financing bank.
Is that is that the end of your section, Ezio?
Well, what another point that I would like to raise is the fact that often we think that the buyers, of course, it is helpful to have a title over a yacht under construction, but what we have seen is that it is not always easy to enforce transfer of title clauses against against a shipyard that has become insolvent, and from a practical point of view, in the sense that, of course, you may have a very good title clause that works under English law, under the law applicable to and the law of the jurisdiction where the construction is taking place, but entering in the premises of the shipyard and taking the hull away to build the hull at the next door shipyard, if there's one, is not always easy. And these are points that are often underestimated, and so it is important to be aware of the fact that completing the construction elsewhere, or to sell the partly built hull to a third party might involve some potentially losses, in the sense that there might be costs associated with the construction that would go beyond the budget that had been originally envisaged, or that the price of selling the hull in the market would be significantly less than the cost, than the value of the installments already injected in the project. It is something to be considered, therefore that needs to be considered. And a few other points to be mentioned are the fact that when completing, when repossessing a partly built yacht, you're not just taking the hull, or better say, the value you paid for is not just for the hull, but it's the installments were proportional to the value of a yacht to be built by a particular builder. So in the end, if you are repossessing the hull, you are just repossessing some steel and equipment and machinery, so you are not repossessing really a ship. And this is a point that we have seen in the context of, in particular, commercial shipping, where at the end you will need to get at some point a builder certificate from the builder that will ultimately complete the construction, and that this particular shipyard might not have the pedigree of the builder that had originally began the construction. So it is another point of attention to be considered.
Okay, thank you, Ezio. Thank you very much. And Ezio, before we pass over to Emma, I am going to have to press you for one last thing. Just a quick guesstimate. What's your prediction for the score on Sunday? Ezio?
Pardon? Can you repeat?
May I have your prediction for the score on Sunday, please?
We win. Italy wins.
There you go. Well, there you go. I suspect Daniela might say the same thing. Okay, so we're now going to move on to Emma Nowell, who is one of our senior associates in the London office. And Emma has probably done more disputes relating to shipbuilding contracts, and in particular super yacht contracts, than is healthy. But there you go, that's the job. So Emma, over to you.
Morning everyone, and thanks for joining us. So a refund guarantee, or an on-demand refund guarantee, is a form of security which is available to an owner to protect its interests in a yacht build project. And the purpose of the guarantee is to secure the refund of pre-delivery installments paid by the owner under the build contract in the event that the build contract is cancelled because the builder becomes insolvent or fails to deliver the yacht for some other reason. We call it an on-demand guarantee because the guarantor's liability to refund the owner is triggered by the owner making a notice of demand, and that demand has to comply with various requirements set out in the guarantee. But provided it does that, the guarantor is liable to refund the owner, and it has a primary liability to the owner, meaning that its liability is not dependent upon the builder's liability under the build contract. So it is seemingly quite a simple contract where the owner can obtain a refund of the pre-delivery instalments by making a simple demand on the guarantor. But there are a number of important considerations when drafting the guarantee and considering the terms of the guarantee. So can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. So it's really important that there's no ambiguity in the wording of the refund guarantee regarding the on-demand nature of the guarantee or the notice requirements, because these issues can lead to disputes and ultimately can compromise the owner's security. This can arise often because an on-demand guarantee is not necessarily obviously an on-demand guarantee on the face of it. Just because it's labelled an on-demand guarantee doesn't mean that it is. We have to look at the overall characteristics of the document, and there's no hard and fast rules. So it's really important here that the drafting is precise and accurate. Likewise, when it comes to terms relating to the form of the notice of demand and how that is to be delivered, it's important that those terms are clear and unambiguous so that the owner knows exactly what it needs to do in order to make a valid demand. And if there's any ambiguity here, it can be used by a guarantor to try and reject the notice of demand. So aside from having a watertight refund guarantee, the value of the refund guarantee is to the owner as security is dependent on the extent to which it can be enforced against the refund guarantor. So it's also very important to look at the creditworthiness of the refund guarantor and the jurisdiction in which the guarantor is located to make sure that the owner will be able to enforce the refund against the guarantor in the worst case scenario. Next slide, please. Actually, I think if you can go back one, missed one. Maybe not, sorry. These types of on-demand refund guarantees are a staple in commercial shipbuilding, as Ezio has already mentioned. But in those cases, typically the builder will retain title until delivery. So the refund guarantee is a buyer's only form of security for a refund of those pre-delivery instalments. But it's not to say that there isn't a place for refund guarantees in yacht build contracts either, or yacht build projects. And it's important that an owner doesn't overlook this as an option. It should be considered as part of the overall project and the owner's security package. And for each yacht project, the details of the refund guarantee will need to be tailored to the needs of that individual project. And for example, the refund guarantee doesn't have to cover all of the advance instalments. It may just cover instalments paid up until the point that there is a physical asset against which title can be registered. Or it also is not necessary for the refund guarantee to be linked at all with the transfer of title. It doesn't have to be an alternative form of security. You could have both progressive transfer of title and some form of refund guarantee as well. So the final takeaway points are that a well-drafted refund guarantee from a reliable guarantor is the most robust security available to an owner to protect its investment in a new build yacht before delivery. And it's not an alternative to the transfer of title, but should be considered together with terms relating to the transfer of title as part of the overall deal. The refund guarantees the refunds under the refund guarantees are payable on demand. So it's really important that they're carefully drafted to ensure that they have the intended effect and that there aren't any disputes later down the line. And the final point, that the refund guarantee is only as valuable as the owner's ability to enforce that guarantee against the guarantor. So creditworthiness and jurisdictional issues also need to be considered early on and dealt with at the outset of negotiations.
Thank you very much, Emma. So Emma, if you could stick around, because I've already had one question for you. So we will get back to that in a second. Our fourth speaker, I'm afraid, has had technical difficulties. It's not a modern webinar without a technical difficulty at some point. Dean Smith is a director at Hampshire Marine and also a founder, and he was going to talk about refit contracts. But I am pleased to say that he will be able to join the next seminar. So we'll get the benefit of his wisdom then. For those of you that are just dying to hear something about refit contracts, I can say a few very brief points, having been involved in some pretty horrendous refit contract disputes. I think one of the problems with refit projects is obviously in commercial shipping or commercial offshore vessels, refit contracts are very much based on a monetary decision. Is it cheaper to do it, or are we better just going for a new asset? But with super yachts, of course, it's much more emotive than that. A yacht might be a treasured possession, a yacht that we went around the world in, a yacht that we've had in the family for 25, 30 years. So inevitably, a yacht may be pushed quite hard, and that might make a refit contract more difficult. And I always think it's a little bit like having a build around to your house when they say, well, we don't know what's behind that wall, but when we take it down, we'll be able to quote. And of course, you say, that's fine, that's absolutely fine. You trust the builder at this stage. And then they take down the wall and it's a mess. There's all kinds of things from behind that wall which nobody was expecting, not the house owner, nor in fact the builder. And of course, then the builder says, well, it's going to cost an awful lot of money. And the house owner says, I didn't want to spend all that money. And then you have a problem, a classic recipe for disaster. And I think probably the only thing I would say for now on refit contracts, waiting as we all are for our next session to get deeper into it, is this. I think you need to have three things. The first is, I think, a very clear scope of work, i.e. what falls within the cost of the refit contract itself. I think secondly, you need to have a very clear view on pricing, i.e. what is included for that scope of work. And third, for the unknown factors, which there always are on refit projects, what are you going to do about how you're going to price up those essentially changes to the work, right? The additional parts of the scope. And you might say, well, it's just been a lawyer, classic lawyer. They make such a fuss about this. It always gets fixed. But I have done a variation stroke refit refurb project, which saw many hundreds and hundreds of variations. And a project that should have taken a year ended up taking 2.5. And you can imagine, of course, for everybody got very upset about that. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to say for now about refit projects. We're still within time, I'm pleased to say, and we've got 8 minutes left. So I will go to the questions. And yeah, Emma, I'm sorry to say that the first question is for you. And it is actually, no, sorry, I take that back. The very first question is actually for you, Ezio. It's how important is construction supervision in the context of transfer of title arrangements? So I hope that's clear.
Well, I think that, as Daniela said, supervision is really important, but in the context of a contract where it is envisaged that the title will be transferred by the builder to the buyer during construction, it is even more important, because it will be really key for the supervisor to be there, to be experienced, to have a track record, experience of dealing with a particular yard, not only in general, to understand how the yard works, how the progress with the construction, and to follow the milestones of the project, to ensure that the money, the value that is given by the buyer is translated into a yacht, into materials, into equipment that are correctly installed, correctly identified. Because as we said before, we should always make a distinction between title to the hull, which is what we can consider to be the ship under construction, and title to the materials and equipment. And sometimes with respect in particular to some equipment, like the engines, or in the context of a sailing yacht, the sails. These are really important items that have an intrinsic value and that should be correctly identified, stored, so that in case of repossession, they can be taken away together with the partly built hull. And so I think also in the context, in particular in the context of pre-delivery financing, the role of an experienced buyer's representative will be seen as something really positive by a bank that accepted to finance the construction on the basis of progressive transfer of title. Because of course the bank will audit the project, and they will have their own project manager inspecting the hull. But the fact that the buyer is assisted by an experienced supervisor will give some additional comfort that will help in keeping the process move. Maybe Daniela, you can say something as well on this point.
Yeah, completely agree with your summary. It's very important to make sure that, as you just said, not only the construction itself, but also the material pertaining to the construction is correctly labeled, correctly stored. If there are equipment still in the subcontractor's premises, this is always a bit a tricky point in case you need to enforce the provision of taking away not only the hull but also the equipment pertaining to the yacht. It would be a good exercise to have periodically extracts of an inventory to make sure that you always have at hand what actually belongs already to the owner, that it's properly marked. If you have an inventory with photographs accompanying it, it's even better. So these are all things that a buyer's representative following through the entire production phase is essential to then demonstrate on behalf of the owner to make sure that everything belonging to the owner is actually at hand and can be brought away together with the hull. Another important aspect in these scenarios obviously is also the drawings, intellectual property of the drawings. This is a bit a tricky thing that would need to be looked at, because if you have to complete the construction at a new shipyard. Obviously, this new shipyard needs to then base the completion works on a set of already engineered construction drawings and plans and schematics. So this is something very important to somehow make sure is being included in this set of assets. The owner is somehow then able to transfer to the completing shipyard. And here again, the knowledge of an industry professional here is really key to making sure that the owner then is able to successfully complete the construction elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Thank you also, Ezio. We've got time for that question for Emma, which is, and actually, Emma, we can keep it pretty short. In reality, how often do guarantors dispute payments under refund guarantees? That's quite...
I'd say that in the vast majority of cases, the guarantor won't dispute it, and they will pay out when a demand is made. But when you are dealing with tens of millions of dollars, the situation does arise that a guarantor will look closely at the terms of the refund guarantee and whether they are in fact obliged to pay out. And so we do see some disputes about this, and when they do arise, they typically relate to issues about the notice itself and whether a valid notice of demand has been made, and they can also arise in relation to whether the guarantee is a true on-demand guarantee conferring that primary liability rather than a secondary liability, which would require then proof that the builder was liable to pay the refund under the build contract as well. So that's why it's very important to just take care early on that the wording of the guarantee is accurate and it has the intended effect, and also to carefully consider the choice of guarantor.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I mean, I think it's fair to say that, as always, we see the sharp end of it. So we have plenty of experience of guarantors not paying out. But then again, if it all goes to plan, then more often than not, you wouldn't call Emma or me or one of our colleagues anyway. Anyway, we're out of time. A few very final comments. I'd like to say thank you very much to Daniela for taking the time to join us today. We're very grateful. I thought that was fascinating, and I do love that slide with the helicopter and the yachts. That's super cool. So thank you, Daniela.
Thank you.
We look forward to welcoming Dean on our next webinar. We're sad he couldn't join us today, but there it is. We're back. For those of you who can't get enough of our content, we're back in the autumn, and I think that's the one we're doing with our Hong Kong office. So we're quite excited about that because we're going to be looking at the Asian angle. So that's going to be great. We also, for those of you who are real diehards, we're also going to be launching a podcast. So that's just what the internet needs, yet another lawyer's podcast. So I'm looking forward to releasing that. And for those of you who are curious to know my prediction for Sunday, I think it will go to penalties and England shall prevail, and it will be the great redemption of Gareth Southgate. Anyway, so that's the end of our podcast, our webinar today. Thank you very much for everyone for attending, and we look forward to welcoming you back in the autumn. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.